Welcome again to the GA podcast. I hope you're enjoying the sessions we've had so far. Today I'm joined by Mark Allen. Mark Allen is, believe it or not, a BAFTA winning or BAFTA nominated.
I didn't win it.
Yeah, nominated filmmaker. But I've seen some of his work, and some of the stories that and people that he's met are just absolutely fantastic. And he's got many a story. But we've had the pleasure of working with him in the last 3 or 4 months, where he's followed some of our crews around and just got a handle on the industry, really. So I just thought it'd be interesting from someone completely outside the industry, but that has had some touch with other parts of construction, I know. Just see what his approach and his insight has been over the last 2 or 3 months. So maybe I should hand over to Mark, and just he can give you a little potted history of who he is and what he's been doing. And yeah, let's go.
Oh, okay. I used to be a journalist for the BBC back in the day in radio, and then into TV, and did a few different shows. I think your BAFTA nomination, that was for after they were famous. We followed the children from The Sound of Music, the actors that played the children. We got them all back together and took them back to Salzburg, and it was a fun show.
Didn't you also bring them into Sarah and got them drunk?
No, that was from the Waltons.
Oh, the Waltons.
So those of you who remember the Waltons series, we did the same on the Waltons. Yeah, one Mary Ellen, I think. Was it Mary? No, the other one. Oh goodness. Mary McDonough is the actress, and yeah, she came over with her husband, and they had a great time.
Enough said.
Yeah. And yeah, then I've probably just generally drifted into more corporate work. Did a lot of work with BP and a lot of major manufacturers, mainly through agencies. Usually directing, but now, as the way of the world, I do everything. So these days, directors used to just direct. Now we have to shoot, edit, and you name it, we do it. So yes, and then I've known Rod for quite a while, and came to follow him around, which was interesting.
Well, but you've also done some. I know probably when we first encountered each other, you'd been doing some for one of the big construction firms, and you've been following FM around.
Yeah,
and doing some.
Yeah. So I did some work with a couple of agencies who service the FM sector. So that was interesting. Yeah, I made a biggish film for Skanska, which was a real eye opener for me. Because, it's a great thing about this job. You suddenly get thrown in, as it was with BP, somebody turning up at an oil refinery. I didn't know how an oil refinery worked on the business of it, and it was fascinating, as was, the FM sector, very interesting, because it's not that far from what I do, in that it's all about people at the end of the day, and, how you handle those people, and obviously they take on these massive contracts to look after multiple buildings. And you've got your cleaners, you've got your security staff. There's a lot going on, and we were really helping them with storytelling. It's all about. That's what I am, I guess, a storyteller. So, trying to help get messages over. So I think BP was a classic in that they had these safety rules that ran to volumes, but of course people don't. And no matter how often they put out a new safety notice, people don't always do what you want. And I think after the Deepwater Horizon incident, they decided a different tact. And one of it was finding stories that typified the sort of behaviour they want to get, real stories. So they'd get it down to a group of finalists around the world, and we'd go out and collect these stories. And the impact of them was massive, because a good story, and we only made 2-minute films. You don't need long to tell a story. But stories, if it's a good story, it tends to stay with you. So, and I think that's really probably set my direction in working in the corporate sector, which is, bringing storytelling into even some of the most technical areas. Stories win every time because you remember them because you were brought up on them since you were a child. Once upon a time there was. And, that's what we do.
So I'm going to keep this specific to the last 3 or 4 months of what you've seen, and maybe bringing in some of the... What's the story that you've seen most engaging at construction?
The story, what I see is incredible teamwork within groups that can achieve things. We stand back and watch them as people who don't live in that environment, and it's amazing that a crane turns up, that you've got an abseiler hanging down a building, that you've got a piece of glass that comes out, goes back in, whatever it is, or an entrance that's built from nothing, and it's just phenomenal because you think, well, how does that meet up with that, and how did you make that happen? But the truth is, it's all about people, and it's all about hearing those conversations that made that happen. So I can't help but get dragged into the problems I see, which is people not talking to each other. And I think that people are just too, their view is too narrow, probably driven by money and time. So you're a building manager, I guess at worst becomes a firefighter who's moving from one thing to another, rather than saying, right, let's start a conversation, let's build this up from the ground and work out what we've got to do.
Is that not similar to your industry though? Like when you're, again, tight timescales, fixed budgets, and limited resources. How is there a sort of some parity with that?
I mean, I've worked in different areas. My first job out of school, I was a policeman for the Met Police in London. Same story there. And yes, it is that you go in ill-prepared. You have to get in and get up to speed fast. And I know in my business, every time I'm trying to get in at ground level, saying, make me part of the discussion. I'm not a bolt-on. I want to see it from day one. And I'd rather go in and not get paid just for the chance of hearing those early discussions, so I can either have input or at least be able to judge what it is you're trying to achieve. So in storytelling, we always have a big story. I always use this analogy of there's a princess trapped in a tower and a knight leaves the castle to rescue her. He goes through a series of challenges. He eventually reaches the tower, rescues the princess, and they go off into the sunset. Now, ignore the misogynistic old story, but the point is there's a big story. There is a princess trapped in a tower, and there is a hope of something resolving itself. So that's always our big story. The detail, but the real protagonist, of course, is the knight, and the fact that what sets him off and the series of things that he goes through, and but all the time, if that information gets too dense or we get too bored in my world, we remind people of the big story. And you see that in storytelling in a great film all the time. There's always this hope. Sometimes it gets inverted. So one minute you think it's this, and it turns out in the end to be something else because you're playing with the story structure. So I think in the built environment, I think that's the problem. That what is the big aim, of the architect, of the main contractor, the building manager. What is their major aim? And I've heard in the FM sector people talk about the well-being of the people in that building, how they go about their work, how they feel. I mean, that is an incredibly kind of romantic view of life. And yet, most of the times they're dealing with carpets, heating systems, blinds, chairs, desks. And I think to be able to keep in view what the big story is can really help. And I suspect, from what I've seen, that's some of the problems you see in projects.
I think that's a really interesting point you make there, because, I've always... the catchphrase we sometimes use is protecting your greatest assets, and that's the people inside. And over the years, the whole well-being of a building is just totally underestimated, especially in times like this. Where we're sort of I hate to say it, but we'd like to think sort of almost post-COVID times, and the changes and investment that I'm seeing in some of the buildings in London, especially when they've had occupancy rates really low, then they're still having to make the investments to make sure that their people are safe, that their people are comfortable, that it's an inviting area, that it's going to be somewhere where they're going to be productive and not like rushing away. It's a place to maybe spend more time socialising with their co-workers and colleagues than perhaps they used to do before, because there's this mix of working 2 or 3 days at home and then sometimes in the office. So I think actually it's interesting, like I think you mentioned before, a house is very different to a home, and when we start thinking of construction, of building a home and somewhere where their end user is going to, it's going to be an interesting discussion, and the way that creativity and design and architecture and engineering are all going to be coming together over the next few years, I think.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, as you said, I think the house and the home is a good one. You're not building a house, you're building a home for someone. And an office or a workplace is, so much time is spent there, probably more time than you spend with your family. So, and this is where you make friends, meet your life partner, for all I know. Lots of things are going on there, but it all gets dragged down to economics as to, where's the value? Are we getting good work out of these people? But what we've got to remember, it's a bit like, my job. I'm a storyteller. How do you get... Well, actually, I don't get that well paid as being a storyteller, but it's a really important thing because, without art, without stories, what are we? And I think in facilities management, I know they talk about this a lot. The lives of the people using your building are more than the productivity they produce out the door. So if you're trying to do a sum or an algorithm, you've got to be really careful of what you do, because you might think you're doing it well, and actually you can't do that. They're human beings. They don't work that way. So they need more. I find it interesting because I studied storytelling, that the Maori New Zealand culture was all storytelling based. They didn't have a written culture until we came along. And then we taught them to read, made them sign a lawful document, and basically, it might be a political statement, but we stole their country. But stories were so important. Entire villages would uproot themselves and take a journey to another village that told certain stories. And they weren't all useful stories. Some of them were just entertainment, and they might be about love and relationships. They might be about food or technology. But they'd actually lose people on the way. They knew that people would actually die when they picked all their people up and took them on this long journey to go to this other village to listen to their stories. And I thought, wow, the power of storytelling was so important to them. And I think we need to tell more stories. And, we're losing that. I think it's odd. We've had the explosion of the internet, and there's a mass of communication going on, but we're missing the stories.
But bringing it back to as a sort of someone capturing a story. What are the sort of top three things that if you had the power to influence, you would suggest, maybe even just suggest to a company like us, what are the top three things that you see as would?
Oh, well, I've only got my experience of my life, so if I'm making a film with someone, we always have some kind of meeting beforehand. Someone's got to have written the script. We've got the various technicians, whether we're doing it live or recorded, and we try and get all of them on the phone or on a Zoom call and talk through what is it we're trying to achieve. So I don't see that as much. They do it on site, but I think I guess with Zoom and everything now, you can just call a meeting and say, right, we're all on site next week. This is what we're doing. Maybe you do this, I don't know. But I think that communication, I think that we're all on the same page. Everyone knows what they're doing, what time we're going to get there, and all that sort of thing. I know it's obviously that's done because everyone turns up, but so I think more communication and that possibility that you're monitoring as well, so your senior managers can see that actually happening and pop in and go, okay, right, this is going to be a 20-minute meeting, we ain't staying here too long. Here's the script. This is what we're doing, and here are the things that we have to remember. So I think that I don't know. Well, the interesting thing is, what I don't see when we're out there, which I'm surprised at, is a lack of contact with the client. So like a building manager, I've met a couple of building managers on your jobs, and they've been great because they know everything about that building. It's their job. And they come out and say hello, and they're kind of, meet them and greet them and make sure they're on spec. So I think, again, that interaction, to the point where just getting into the building sometimes, because the communication's not there. The key people don't know. So I think, that a greater connection with the people, actually, your end consumer who's looking after the building, it would be good to see. I think when they turn up on site, even though they turn up for 10 minutes, makes a huge difference from what I've seen. And then I guess the only thing is just getting constant feedback on the work that's going on. You know, you almost want the body cams that the police carry. But I don't know what you do with all that information. I suppose it would be too much. But getting information back and being able to see what's happening in real time, I find that an interesting concept.
Well, to be honest, I do. The guys all know that I just love that feedback. So if especially if we've got a challenge, you know, regardless, because a lot of the time we're working at night or working at weekends, I'll say, give me a FaceTime, and we'll try and resolve whatever the situation. If I can, if I can't, I'll bring someone else in. So I'll often bring people in, and that's the beauty of technology. So we'll have a 3-way or 4-way. Sometimes even the client say, look, this is what we're looking at. We wasn't expecting it. Let's make a joint decision. So yeah, I mean it can be if you're just storing the information, but in, you know, like a point in time, it's just an invaluable tool. Just to be able to see exactly what's going on, especially if you have to make a decision, you know.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, the thing is, obviously, people get on with the work. It happens. It works. It's safe. It's good. I think the only reason as I understand, you started these podcasts is, you know, can it be better, and what is around the corner. I think, you know, digitization sounds like a buzzword, but it's real. It's happening, and, you know, we better get ready for it. And also, I think it can be done better, you know, but it all comes down to people and communication. You know, when you know, some of the building managers I've spoken to, they're fantastic. I love them. I think facilities management has been overlooked in the past, you know, but they're almost the replacement. I remember when I first went to work in an office many, many years ago, you know, some of the security people and the cleaners had been there longer than most people in the building, and they held that building together. They had the bunch of keys. They knew everything about it. If you wanted anything, you go and speak to old Jim, who was here back in the 30s. And of course, we've lost that now. We don't have those, you know, jobs for life people who actually, you know, run the fabric of that building. And it's a shame we've lost them, because we lost something really beautiful there. And FM have had to take that on, and that's a tough gig.
Well, yeah, but I think that's a great point, because I think those guys really should be celebrated. I mean, I can count on two hands if I had them. If I had two sets of hands, if I had them, I can, you know, 20, at least 20 people that I deal with that are, you know, 60 plus, and those guys I have been with the building and care about the building and remember things that, you know, like that you just wouldn't be able to contain, but they just sort of live and breathe it and are a part of the operation, and are part of, you know, if they need a firefight, they know exactly, you know, and they build up these trusted networks with suppliers and subcontractors over the years that I think that sometimes that the building owner takes for granted. And yeah, I mean, I think that would be something that I think, you know, people should just pause. You know, anyone who's got a big portfolio that says, right, okay, it's the facilities managers who are living and breathing this building and maintaining the asset. So, you know, if I've paid £100 million for it, that it's still worth at least, you know, £100 million by the time I finish with it in 5 or 10 years' time. And I think there's a real skill to being a facilities manager.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
they're the unsung heroes of the building world, I think, and understanding their people, and you know, and I saw it happening in my lifetime. These, you know, some old cleaner who knew that building and did so much more than just clean it, and they got pushed out because they could save money on some big contractor that came in and said, no, we'll get people who do it cheaper than Old Mavis because we don't want to pay a pension or something like that, you know. And I think it's such a short-term measure that we need people in jobs that, you know, care about their jobs.
So I'm going to hit you know, I usually close off with our point. So this can be something that you've seen with our industry or something relevant to you. Where's the potential? 2021 going forward. Where's the potential
in this business?
whatever you where's the greatest potential that you've seen filmmaking? Yeah, I mean, if you can relate it to the industry.
So I think the greatest potential is realizing that these are more than things. I think it comes back to where I started. It's a home, not a house, and a workplace or a building that people work in whatever way is so much more. And I think we need to hark backwards. So digitization, all these technical things are great, but I think the real advantage is realizing that our lives are spent in these buildings, and we should be thinking about that more. And I think if we do think about that more, I think business get greater productivity. I went into one business and they shut off YouTube, I think, or I can't remember, some internet channel. They said, people waste their time at the computers if we allow them to watch that. And I thought, well, no, that's because your workers are demotivated. They don't like their job. You've gone about this all arse about face. You've found a technical answer to a human problem, which was that why are your people doing that? And you can take away all the things they do. They'll find something else to do because they're not doing your work. And that reason is something else. It's not because you've got the wrong workers. It's because something else is going on. So I think the potential is to realise that this is our lives, and it's so much bigger than having a warm or cool office to work in.
What about the opportunities? Any opportunities out there for anyone getting into the industry that you see?
Oh, you mean if you're coming into it now? Well, I think certainly building up FM to be more than it is. I think even the people in FM, I noticed, some of them do have their heads down like they're the poor relation in this whole chain. And of course, they're absolutely integral. So I think if we built that role up more to realise these are people that care about you when you're at work. These are the people that keep you safe, keep you warm, and keep you motivated. They can do a lot more. I think there's a lot of possibilities in that business. And actually, looking back on it, having poked my head into it, I thought, if you're a bit of a storyteller and a communicator, that's where you need to be. And there's, they're big contracts as well. There's money to be made in there, and yet you could care.
Certainly, if you're a facility manager listening to this and you want to jump on a show, give us a quick DM or
definitely
email, and we'll take your point of view as well. Well, okay, so impact, and where's the impact? You think what impact does facilities management, if you want?
Oh, if we're going to follow down that line, well, I mean, look what's happening now. People are being asked to work more from home, and I know several people who've been told you'll be in the office a couple of times a month. It's breaking their hearts. They don't want to be, especially if you're in the creative industries. You don't want to be stuck at home staring at a screen. You want interaction. So I think, rather than thinking in facilities, we're going to have less people sitting in offices, I think change the office so that it becomes a space that people want to work and collaborate in, and can do so safely when it comes to, virus spreading and all that sort of business. Those can be solved technologically, but people need that interaction often. I mean, some people prefer to be at home, and that's fine. I think most people don't, actually. My experience of home working is I'd rather be in an office, but I want that office to be...
So you think the greatest impact is get the people back into the offices
in a new way.
Yes. Create a better environment than before, and we'll all be a bit happier.
Well, yeah, and we don't have to be 9 to 5 anymore because we've got that digital connection. We've proven it works, so that should stop this horrible 9 to 5 commute in and out of cities. I mean, I hope those days will pass.
Is there a where's the sort of need? Do you think it's the need is from the workers' point of view, or do you think there's this vested interest in the building owner wanting us to come back and inhabit?
Yeah, well, I think
it's all connected.
I think they're aligned for the first time in a long time, but I think the owners and operators of the buildings have got to think more creatively about what it is they're asking people to do. I think the truth is it'll always be down to the workers, because they're the people that are going to make somebody some money by being happy and motivated in their job enough to do it well, rather than some begrudgingly stuck in an industrial process where they're in one end and out the other. So I would hope the impact will be, happier, healthier work lives, because I think that's been ignored. I think, we all look back to Victorian days and go, look at the terrible things we made them do. Well, I think in recent years it's almost turned full circle. I've seen some dreadful jobs that people are trapped in and working in some dreadful conditions, which I'm sure in another 100 years I'll look back and think, look what we made people do. Because I think, we've got families, we've got lives, we've got things we're interested in, and I think that's all got to be taken into an account, and I think that will increase productivity, I'm sure of it, rather than trying to regulate because you think someone might be wasting their time playing solitaire or buying something on eBay.
So transformation, where's the transformation point, or what needs transforming? What's your viewpoint?
I think our whole society lacks trust. We don't seem to trust anyone anymore, and I think that's very sad. I think we did, because we had a moral code that we'd think, well, being a decent member of society was important. And I do kind of feel that now it's all down to regulations. We've even said it here. How do you get something changed? Regulation. Well, we didn't write all the laws in the world. Like my BP example, it's actually the stories that started to change things, not the lists of regulations and working practices. So, I just hope that people... I worked in the supermarket once, and the interesting thing is the good supermarkets trust their workers. So they have a problem at the supermarket where something's badly, the barcode doesn't work, or you don't know what the price is. Well, what they could do is just trust the person sitting at the desk to make a decision on that and go, you know what, that's £1. I'm ringing that up as grocery, £1, it's yours. We'd all love that because it makes it quick. And sure, some people will screw that system. But it's like for the fear of someone doing that wrong or doing it deliberately for a friend, so we don't trust them. And then so you're standing at checkouts while someone's waving, trying to get someone else to run around the store to find another one that has a better printed barcode. And I think that's a classic example of working practices, that we need to change that and trust people and accept that some people are going to screw the system because some people are like that. But we can't run the whole system on the basis that somebody might do something wrong. I think we have to trust our workers. And I think that's happened with home working. You've had to trust people to work from home, and that's a big one because no one's trusted anyone to do that up until COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. A fascinating point of view, Mark. That's it's really be interesting hearing someone from the outside, although not really outside, because I know actually you've had quite a lot of experience, and I know that
I'm pretty outside. I didn't know what O&Ms were. And I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to chat again. So if you've enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe, and hope to have you with us soon. And if you've got a point of view or you'd like to come on and just see how things can be built differently or looked after differently, or you have an interest in facilities or the repair, maintenance, installation industry, give us a shout. For the meantime, thanks for joining and take care.